Return to Wisdom is a space where we will explore subjects like relationship, motherhood, and health through a new lens. Bring a curious mind and an open heart and get ready to delve into the deep with your host, Keshia Tonyazzini. True story. I used to get panic attacks, and when I went and investigated this, it turns out I had low iron, something 1 in 3 of us have. Now, regular iron supplements, gross. They're full of synthetics. Your body doesn't even absorb it, and be honest, inflammation. So when I found this supplement, I just had to share it with you guys. It is Great Spirit. They are organic, synthetic free. It is all whole food based, and they're produced here in Australia. I cannot believe the difference I've seen in my energy levels and no panic attacks. So if you want to check them out, you can head to greatspirit.com.au. Use the code Keshia20 for 20% off your first order and enjoy feeling good again. Before we get into today's show, I firstly want to thank you for being here. It is because you tune in each week that I'm able to continue on, and I really appreciate your support. Secondly, if you enjoy the content, please head on over to the homepage of the show. Hit subscribe, like, share, and please review the channel. It would mean the world. This is a small way you can contribute to better guests and greater conversations. Now, without further ado, you're listening to Return to Wisdom with Keshia. Welcome everyone to Return to Wisdom podcast. Today I have Nadia Sophia Coaching. I mean, that's your handle, not your name.
My birth name.
Not
my birth name. No. My parents did not go, she looks like a Nadia Sophia Coaching. Let's call her that.
But look, you could change it. I mean, we're in that.
We're probably era. In that generation where it's going to happen. Someone's going to name their kid like, Tony Robbins 2.0, manifesting it into reality probably.
If you can think it, it's here. But while we're on that, do you want to explain to listeners who you are and what you do?
Yeah, sure. So hello, I'm Nadia. Thank you for having me. And yes, as you mentioned, I work as a coach. Specifically, I work as a mental fitness and mental performance coach. Essentially, what that looks like is I have sort of two arms of my business based on the fact that, I studied psychology when I was at uni, and I just sort of came to the realization that I didn't like the way we were looking at mental health. It was very diagnosis driven, very label driven, very like, this is something very different than the normal person is. And what sort of didn't land for me and what has kind of organically grown in my business is that these things exist on a spectrum. On one spectrum is really struggling with your mental health, and on the other spectrum is like really peak mental performance, like the same as what we see with athletes and physical fitness. So I started in more the mental health space and then slowly over time progressed into a concept of mental fitness being this idea that I don't really work with like the clinically depressed, really serious mental illness. I'm working more with general population who want to build a level of mental fitness so that they can thrive mentally and they can be absent of mental health conditions. And of the belief that I can take a person on the entire length of this spectrum, the other side of it being a world where we're so focused on optimizing our mental performance, optimizing our lifestyles and way of living, that we are performing at our peak and we're succeeding at our max, and mental health is actually a thing of the past, is the real dream for me. And I deliver that service both one-on-one, in groups. I also speak to corporates and have sort of different programs and stuff that I've delivered. And I come from a background of, as I mentioned, psych, but then I also went on to work in corporate HR for 6 years. I then studied coaching and am a now performance qualified coach, and also went into things like the functional elements and the trauma release elements of breathwork and some functional health. So again, that, holistic is a word we're all using at the moment, but I definitely think that's, in HR, we have a term, you're either a generalist or a specialist in a certain area. And I was a generalist in HR, and I would say I exist as a generalist, as a coach as well. And again, for me, the reason for that being most of us are a general being. We have, you might be a mother and a wife and a woman in yourself and desires for health and in business, and all of these things are not separate from one another. So if you go to just the doctor or just the relationship counselor or just the business coach, there's so many elements of who you are that are not being considered that I believe are all very consequential. So again, I believe for most people, for a big part of the journey, what they actually need is someone who's looking at all of them and helping them achieve a level of success that is actually across all areas of life rather than just the one. And there might be certain points on the journey where a specialist has a place. For example, maybe you've just had little ones and you're having trouble raising them, and you go and speak to someone who really specializes in, children's development or whatever in that moment in time. But I would say, I'm pulling this figure out of my ass, but 80% of the time, really, we actually need someone who can zoom out and look at how all those things interrelate to actually bring us up in a way that's really like sustainable and crosses over to the whole of who we are.
I love that. And I think that we are living in a time and place where mental fragility is an epidemic, and working on that multi-level spectrum of how to create a mental health that's not mental health, but like mental performance. And anyway, that's why I really love your work and was really drawn to it, because not a lot of people are actually talking about bringing up like the resilience game. And I don't know if anyone listening has been out in the real world lately, but we are struggling with mental resilience.
Yeah, or I think like there's sort of, again, we're living in this time of two extremes where you could end up on the part of the internet that's like David Goggins, Joe Rogan, Jocko. I don't know if people are familiar with those names, but if you are, like that's the part of the internet that's just like, go, hustle, do, excuse my French, but fuck your feelings, like get it done. And then on the other end of the spectrum is like all this, around that word mental health and all these things that are coming in around like this awareness and understanding and dissolving the shame and like, putting yourself first. And there's these two real extremes. And I would agree that there is a real lack of middle ground, which is actually like the reality of what people need. And even the choice to stop using the word mental health, that was a very practical choice myself and my coach made, and started using the term mental fitness, because even the word mental health, it just lends to that whole mental fragility space. It's like those people that are so unwell and so convinced that their diagnosis is the thing that they will hide behind, a total lack of responsibility, that there's any ability to get past or to fix that, that I think a lot of victimhood and fragility, like I like that word that if you've used, has fallen in with that term. So I think for me, I like mental fitness because we're talking in that same realm, but fitness, we understand you're not born with fitness. You might have some genetic predisposition, but it's something that you build and you grow. And that is absolutely no different from a mental perspective. And that's definitely like the language and the rhetoric that I'm trying to bring in, because equally harmful is the hustle culture when administered by someone uneducated. It can cause a lot of damage to the nervous system. It can be really harmful. It can cause us to ignore things we need to ignore. But yeah, and I don't know if this has always happened, right? This is my first time on the globe. This is my first time at this age. But right now, when I look around, I just see such extremes. And I'm just such an advocate for every extreme has a place, but it requires context of where you're at in your life, what you need, what you value, your lifestyle. And that context is not easy to market from a sales perspective. So I think that's another reason why people are really not talking about it online, because it doesn't sell as well, but you are being disadvantaged as a result of living in one of those two extremes when it doesn't cater for the nuance of your life and the stages of life that you will go through.
I actually find that really fascinating, because there is a massive void between those two extremes. You very rarely find someone like kind of coasting in the middle. That it's either hustle culture, which I don't think, I was going to say in my area isn't quite as rife, but actually it is. No, you've got both ends of the spectrum. And very limited space for balance. But I think too, and correct me if you find otherwise, within that, you almost do have to flirt with going over across the lines, maybe just not like in extremes. I find to get things done, it's like, okay, I've got energy now. I can get into hustle frame of mind. Okay, I don't. I'm going to go into my rest and digest. So there's, I guess finding that balance in my personal life has been a bit like that.
And I think that's exactly it, right? It's not to be balanced in every moment. It's in the macro of your existence and your circumstances, treating everything as what it is, which is a tool, right? You don't look at a tool belt and go, oh, the hammer is my favorite. Oh, no, I'm a screwdriver girl. I don't need any hammers, At some point, you're going to have a nail, you're going to have a screw. You need both. Neither are better or worse. And this applies to every concept we're talking about. Hustle has a place. Ignore your feelings has a place. Listen to your body has a place. Be in your awareness and be there for yourself has a place, as does think about other people beyond yourself. Everything, it is all tools, and you need to have a really good tool belt, and you need to know when to use each tool. And that is the piece that we are not learning, because, you're getting people telling you hammer is the only tool. And when you put it in that context, you hear how stupid it sounds, right? But it applies to everything, like, even dietary things. Like, cool, there's a place to be carnivore, there's a place to be vegan, and there's a place to definitely do neither. But we don't like to go to that gray. One, I believe, because it's not good marketing. And two, self-trust is not an easy thing. And I think, again, that's something that's really in short supply, is people who truly understand themselves, trust themselves, and can execute, right? And if you can't trust yourself and you don't know yourself, then you don't know when to pull a tool. So you're attracted to people who tell you there's one rule and one way to do everything, because then you can absolve yourself of the responsibility and just ride down this wave of, I'm choosing me, like it's good for me. Like that's what I read, Let Them, and Mel Robbins is the best. And so now I'm just letting everyone let them, rather than sometimes knowing there's a moment to not fucking let them, But we have to have a level of self-awareness and self-trust that I just also really think is absent in society today.
Can we ride that thought wave for a little bit? Because when it comes to raising children, and I have 5 of them, I want to instill these values into them, and I would imagine most parents do. So where does this lack of trust for our body, for ourselves and for our bodies, stem from, and how can we avoid that when trying to instill values in our children so that they have that self-awareness, they have that trust? We're not raising little narcissistic monsters, but at the same time, we're not raising like flog themselves to the ends of the earth children. So, yeah.
I think like attachment theory sort of stuff plays a lot into this, that idea of children understanding that they have a safe base where they're loved and safe no matter what. But they're also encouraged to explore and make decisions and figure things out for themselves. And there is going to be consequences when they do the wrong thing. It's not that I don't love you, but that was the wrong thing to do. And this is why that was the wrong thing to do. And again, they're not coddling them so much that, that cotton wool, oh, don't do this, don't do that, you're afraid, don't go too far from mum. And, I think of this story. I was doing a hike in Colombia. And I was, in the middle of the Amazon, and we stopped at a watering hole, and there was these 2 little boys, and one was 4 and one was maybe he was older than 4. He was old enough to swim and stuff. And the other one was clearly a toddler who could not swim. They had no parent. They came to the water. The child that could swim was in the water, swimming, hanging out. The little toddler honestly couldn't have been older than 2, hanging out at the side of the water, standing there, knowing where he shouldn't go past. Because children, I think, are a lot smarter than what we give them credit for, but out of the fears and the reality of certain elements of our society, not having community, not having a backyard to let them play, because if you let them play, they get straight onto a main road. There's all these things that they're missing out on the opportunity to literally build the trust in themselves that they can cross the road by themselves, that they can they can clean up their mess, that they're not going to hurt themselves when they try to climb up onto the chair, you know? So I think it's a big piece of parents being able to regulate themselves enough to allow their children to learn in a way that's not hindered by your stuff, you know, while still providing that really safe and secure base. And I think it is a very, like, you know, I don't have children yet, so it's, again, very easy for me to say these things from a place of reading, but I guess I do spend a lot of time reversing in adults what happened in childhood. So I do think I do have a unique perspective from there. And I do think that, yeah, the children who trust themselves are the ones that were allowed to make their way through the world with an element of trust from their parents that they were capable of that, you know, and that line of consequences that don't mean I don't love you or you're a bad boy or girl, right? I think, again, we've gotten so worried about, oh, don't call children bad, don't call them this, we don't want to quash their personal identity, this, that, and the other, and then we're trying to give them no consequences, right? But it's like, I love you and this behavior was not okay. Did you think about the fact that this person was going to get hurt? Would you like it if you got hurt? You know, this is why we don't like to hurt people, really kind of taking them on a journey and teaching them about consequences rather than punishment, because it's like, if you hurt another child, well, the consequence is that child probably doesn't want to be your friend anymore. And now you might be lonely or other kids might be scared of you. That's not punishment. That's understanding of, like, that's what happens when you behave like that in a world and in a community. If you break your toy and I take your toy away and I don't buy you a new one, I'm not punishing you. That's just consequence. You broke your toy. You didn't respect your property. You don't get to hold on to things you don't respect because they go in the bin when they're broken, you know?
I love that. Have you listened, or I listen to books these days because multitasking, but have you read Abigail Schreier's book, Bad Therapy?
No.
It's a good one. It's a really good one. And I just finished it recently. And she actually speaks about, like, this situation that we're in at the moment where parents are both coddling but also not providing boundaries. It's like it's a really strange space to be in, because we're like helicoptering, I guess, when they're young, giving them phones really early so we know exactly where they are at every single moment and point. And obviously, again, when speaking about balance, there is a time and place for that. But at the same time, they're like not getting, hang on, where am I going with this? So they're not getting boundaries as well. So it's like, oh yeah, you have, like, I'm going to give you endless amounts of freedom, choice, and, you know, you can do whatever you want and there's not going to be any consequences to your actions, but then I'm going to hover over you at the same time. And it's like this weird dynamic where we're creating children who will never be able to trust what they are doing, because they always need to check in with you, one. And I'm not talking about in a toddler way where they do need to check into you. I'm talking about like 10-year-olds that are like, how do I feel about this, mum? You know? And then at the same time, we've got like there's zero consideration for any humans around them or any humans they have to share space with, because there's no boundaries. So it's like it's all just about you and what you want and what you do and your development and your experience. So as I say that again, there is a time and place, but it's the swinging from both these extremes that's not helping our children, because they're not developing the necessary social skills and I guess mental skills as well to be able to make it in an adult world, which essentially is what we're trying to achieve.
Yeah. And something that came to me while I was listening to you speak is something I've actually been thinking a lot about recently, which is, unfortunately, I think a lot of people parent from a place of it being about them. You want to know where they are and you want to help them. You want them to be right next to you when they're riding their bike, and you want them to hold your hand everywhere in the shopping center because you get to feel better. You don't have to live with the fear and risk that they might not stop at the traffic light and something might happen to them, and then that's your fault. And you don't want to feel the anxiety that you have to feel in having an awareness of them in a shopping center without actually holding them. It's very much about you, and even not giving them consequences. You have read all these books about trauma and you don't want to be like your parents, and and the reality is, like, parenthood done right is not about you. This child is an entity completely separate from yourself, who is not here to service any of your needs or to make you feel any more or less comfortable. And in an ideal world, people would go into parenthood from a place of that. But I think a lot of people are going into parenthood as, I want a baby. I always saw myself as a mum. I want this as my purpose and my thing in life. And as a result, it's very difficult to actually get into a place where you're like, what is in the best for this child? Because I've got too many things riding on this that I don't know how to regulate and I don't know how to hold space for. So I'm healing my shit through this parenting situation, and it makes it really hard, right? I liken it to the reason we give so much better advice when we're not involved is because we don't have emotional investment. It's easy to be objective. And like, obviously parenthood isn't going to be objective, and obviously it has an element about it that is for you. But again, I think there is a lack of people having done the healing beforehand and then using their children as a conduit for that, and having the difficulty to make their lives uncomfortable to be what is in the best actual interest of the child and the child's future. Like, perfect example is, and again, so much easier said than done, because I'm not in that scenario where, say you have a kid that is absolutely tantruming, you know, maybe you had a dysregulated nervous system, you got stuff wrong at the start, and then now you're doing the work and you're getting it, and this kid is like a little psycho, right? Because this happens, and this child is such hard work, and now you continue to give in to the kid because you can't handle the tantrum, you can't handle the screaming, you can't handle, but like, what happens to that child as it grows up and it enters the world, and it never can come back from that, you know? And I totally appreciate all easier said than done. And when I'm in that situation, I'm likely to make similar mistakes. But I do think that is an area like to consider when you are thinking about raising your kids. Like, is this genuinely coming from an understanding of this being in service of the child's best interest, or is this more comfortable and easy for you?
Yeah, like comfort comes into this a lot, actually, and the avoidance of anything that is uncomfortable. And I'm sure that you have gone to lengths and bounds of where comfort is involved in creating fragile minds. But I do agree with that, like when it comes to tantrums or holding a boundary with children, that yeah, we do want to see kids that can, one, ride through a storm of their emotions and not be made correct for those emotions. Like, if you've got a child that's tantruming because they didn't get the lollipop that they wanted, and they feel bad because they haven't got what they wanted, instead of making them correct for those emotions, they can feel the emotions, but it's actually not a necessary response. And I feel like that's something that's kind of lacking. And obviously this is age dependent as well, but I have seen 8-year-olds tantrum, and I can tell you that it is not an appropriate age to be tantruming over something like that, for instance.
Yeah.
So yeah, when it comes to like emotions, I think actually emotions is like a massive part in mental fragility, because so often we're told to believe the emotions we feel because it's our feelings, and so it must be true. But there's like one thing about feelings is kind of that they come up in all areas. Actually, you know what? You could probably talk about this a lot better than me, Nadia. But yeah, that like how feelings aren't actually always correct, and sometimes we need to learn how to regulate that.
Feelings are feelings, not facts. And
thank you. You did say a lot better than me.
Yeah, feelings are feelings, not facts. And again, you said something earlier, time and place. I feel like that should be tattooed on my forehead. When someone says, should I do it? Time and place, and that's the thing with emotions. Like, yes, do you need to be connected with your body and your emotions? Yes, because they are a source of communication from your system. Does every piece of communication need to be acted upon and taken seriously? No, same as in conversation. We might say really deep and impactful, important things, and we might sometimes say some absolute caca that does not need any additional attention, right? And same as we learn to be discerning to that when we're talking about someone. Talking to someone is when your partner's talking to you, is every single word they say something that you need to catalog for later? No. You've built the discernment of what's important, what's not important, what's important to this person based on what I know about them, based on the contract of our relationship. What things do I need to remember, right? You need to build that same sort of relationship with your emotions and with your body to understand when is it something to act upon, when is it something to regulate, when is it the perfect example is the week before my cycle, I have plenty of emotions. And should I make them wrong or bad? No. But should I act upon them? Also not, because I know that a week later, I probably will not be angry at my boyfriend's chewing, and I probably don't need to send him to a program where he's taught how to chew not like a cow. I probably know that that's just a thing that's inflated by my feelings in that moment, right? So it's understanding that just because something is valid doesn't make it important. You know what I mean? Like we all literally, I think that conversation analogy is the best one. It's valid. I can talk all I want. It doesn't mean every word I say is important.
No, but also what you do say could be important to one person and not to the other.
Yeah.
And again, coming back to children, I'd love to teach my children how to discern between information that's relevant for them and information they can just let filter on, because wow, Keshia, how great is the quality of your new podcast, Return to Wisdom? Oh, mate, I know. I have been recording at Byron Bay's premium content and podcast recording studio, Pod Byron. They are epic. It's new, it's fresh, it's legit, as you can see. If you want to upskill your brand, if you want to create a course online, this is the place to do it. Jump on at podbyron.com and be sure to check the show notes for a sneaky little discount on your first session. Pod Byron, that's where it's at. I have had the experience of releasing a few podcasts recently where I've, had to speak to people in my DMs because that information wasn't relevant to them, and so they got really upset about it because it wasn't true for them. And I'm like, okay, but this is the era we're in. We're in an era of information where you can seek all the information you want, and you can listen to only affirming information as well if that's what feels good for you, whether it's right or not. But if that's what you want to do, go for it. But also, you can listen to information and be like, actually, that part doesn't really land for me at all.
Yeah.
That part does, and I don't want to touch it yet because it's triggering. And this is the part I'm going to take that is maybe halfway between affirming and actually shit I need to deal with. So I do find that very interesting.
But if you don't trust yourself, then you don't have the ability to do that. So you're therefore triggered by other people bringing things into your reality that's uncomfortable for you. And it's easier for you to demonize and reject that person than to actually trust yourself and your ability to work through that in a way that lets you discern what is and what isn't for you, And something that I talk a lot about for me in terms of, because I say this, information is no longer power. It is about what you can integrate and understanding what not to listen to as much as what you do listen to. And what I like to say is you need to first deeply understand yourself. You need to know what you value, and you need to know what your long-term goals are. And from there, you can discern essentially what is and what isn't for you, and what is it isn't relevant. If you have those filters, you're always going to know what lands and what doesn't land. Right? Like if you're a mum with 3 kids and you're listening to David Goggins and then you're shaming yourself because you're not doing what Goggins is doing, babe, look at some filters here. Is he living your circumstances? Does it seem like he has the same goals as you? Does it seem like he wants the same things as you, yet you're comparing that information and judging yourself and getting angry when it's just like not relevant?
And information and energy. Oh my gosh, how's my speaking? And an energy drain.
Yeah.
No, I find that interesting. Like that comes back to a lot of what comparison stuff that we're all doing, thanks social media, but something to look at in yourself, because I do see a lot of mothers either shaming themselves for not being on the game as much as the next mother, or as much as that mother on Instagram living her best trad wife life. But then other mothers who, you know, are not maybe going to their greatest capacity because self-care and I don't want to end up burnt out. And so I guess we're just constantly feeding this trying not to go to extremes narrative, but here we go.
I know, we found
how
our
many
topic.
examples can we give?
We are hammering it in, you know, like, and people don't like to hear that. You want to get off the podcast and be like, I have all the answers. That girl, she's great. Whereas no, what I really believe in as a coach is, I guess, what you're trying to do as a parent. I want to empower people to be capable of making their own decisions and filtering their own information and trusting themselves in the process. And that's what parenthood is done right. Empowering that little person to be a person within themselves that does have your support if they need it, but is individual and capable external to that in the realities of what this world is going to be for them.
I wonder if we could go into any principles that we can give or suggestions for mothers in terms of when it comes to like struggle culture and this like trend we're seeing on Instagram. It's been around for a while. It's not just trending, but where we're, you know, encouraged to complain about all the aspects of motherhood and how hard it is. And this like constant struggle culture. Do you have any practical tips that we could give in terms of like mental resilience around the inputs you're getting and creating those filters?
I think one of the first things that comes to mind is it does not matter what your circumstances are, there'll always be something to complain about. Again, I was speaking to a mother in my community the other day, and she was sharing how, you know, she was feeling behind in her career and felt like she wasn't showing up exactly for her kids in the way she wanted, and was talking about how like my career was exactly what she wanted. And I said, I totally understand all the things you're saying. I said, but I want you to flip. If you were in my position, you'd be saying, I'm 32 and I don't have kids yet, and I'm not married yet, and my partner hasn't proposed to me, and I don't have kids, and I'm going to be older when I have kids, and then my career is going to be settled. But, you know, there's always going to be what there isn't. So I think like the very, very obvious one is focusing on what there is to be grateful for and what it is that you gain from your current circumstances. And for every negative you find, can you think of the person that would be grateful for that negative, right? The woman who's desperately been trying to get pregnant through IVF for however many years, or, you know, you got 3 and they're screaming and you're like, it was easier than 1. It's the mother that can't have more than 1, or that, you know, I think just that reality of put yourself in another person's shoes and ask yourself what you do have to be grateful for, I think is the opposed to that. And again, there's a time and place where it's not a world's smallest violin competition. You're allowed for things to be hard. You deserve to feel what you need to feel and have your days. But is living in the struggle of it making your struggle better or worse? So if you talk to your friend and then you feel better afterwards and the rest of your day is amazing, it probably means you're using your struggle and your expression in a healthy way. But if all you do is struggle internally, struggle externally, and you're not feeling any better, obviously that methodology is not working for you, and that might be a sign to start correcting back in the other direction. Can you actually be the person that every time you have a complaint, you also have to decide something you're grateful for? Every time something's hard, you can ask, who is someone that would be praying for this hard? And can you use that information to flip yourself? Whereas say, again, you're the parent who never complains, everything's always fine and it's amazing and that's not working. Well, maybe you actually should go share with someone. And can you find that piece? The next thing I would say as well, something that I see with a lot of the mums that I speak to in my community is narrowing your focus. I think, again, a big reason why so many women are stuck in struggle is because they're trying to do everything all the time with no awareness of what is realistic and then constantly feeling disappointed and frustrated and stressed because they never get there. Whereas if from the front end of the week you are really honest, like what actually matters, what really can get done, and you actually plan and organize yourself in a realistic way rather than an idealistic way, you'd also have, and yeah, either way, things aren't getting done. If you're honest on the front end about what is and isn't getting done, your experience of struggle will be a lot different.
I like that. I'm going to implement that.
Yeah, honestly, it's the biggest thing I say. I'll be talking to a mom about, I didn't get these things done. I'm like, okay, can you list me what you're trying to do at the moment? And I'm like, are you right? Like, do you really, I have 2 children under the age of 2, and I'm also trying to become a meditation teacher and journal every day, and my husband works night. You know what I mean? Like, be real and then plan according to what is real, and there will be a lot less struggle and complaint there as well. I think that social media comparison piece is making you feel like you have to do everything. And then in the comparison of when you don't is making you feel worse. Whereas positive reinforcement loop is plan to do less, get that less amount done, get a release of dopamine that keeps you feeling good and keeps you moving and keeps this traction of wins on the board rather than losses. A done list rather than a to-do list. So like at the end of the day, literally being like, what are the things that I got done today? And just saying that out loud to yourself or writing those things down. Because again, you're reinforcing the gain, the benefit. We build mental fitness not just from surviving the wrong, but also reinforcing the good. So we have like positive fuel in the tank as well as the things that didn't go to plan. So, there's a concept called the gap versus the gain. Put it into ChatGPT, ask it to explain it to you. And living in the gain is looking at from where I started to where I am, what's the progress versus from where I am to where I want to be, being the gap. So can you actively spend more time in a perspective in the way that you talk, in the things you focus on, looking at what you have done, the traction you have made, because that will counterbalance the bad that's happening. We've all had you crashed your car, but you're going on holiday tomorrow and you're like, well, it's annoying, but I'm going to Bora Bora tomorrow. You know what I mean? Like we get a balance and payoff. So you need to spend time generating focus on what is good because there is always good. And if you're telling yourself there's not, then again, that very basic thing of wake up every day and keep writing something to be grateful for until your brain gets better at finding that kind of information.
I do wonder how much of that would feed into the current modern culture we have that undervalues motherhood to the extreme. Because I think even being a mother, I did for a very long time undervalue the amount of things I was doing in a day. So I would get to the end of a day with a newborn, and even when I just had one baby, I'd be like, what did I even do today? Well, I kept that baby alive.
Yeah.
Like what required
You've literally kept a baby alive.
Yeah, you kept a baby alive. And when you say it like that, it's like, oh, great, I did one thing on my to-do list. But if you break down everything that's required to keep said baby alive, that's a lot. It's like it's
how
a
many
lot.
How many nappies did you change? How many times did you pick them up? How many times did you shush them? How many times did you feed them? How many times did you put them to bed? How many times did you readjust how you were holding them for them to be more comfortable? Like if you got to the end of the day or the end of every hour and you were like, what did I do? I held my baby for an hour, which is enabling them to have secure attachment and a regulated nervous system, which is going to allow them to spend the rest of their lives in a very, very different way than most children today. I stayed off my phone for 10 minutes so that I could be present with my child. You know what I mean? Like these things they're not small and they're not inconsequential, but we're not focusing enough on them. So, you know, the heavy feels heavier when all we think about is the fact that it's heavy.
I think like one of the things that really flipped my mindset around motherhood, because it's so easy to just keep going with it, and like you have another kid and you're feeding another mouth, and like you just keep readjusting what the new normal is, right? And then all of a sudden, like the keeping the children alive is just a normal thing. And so if you're not doing anything on top of that, it's like, what did I do? I just like lived. But something that really like shifted my perspective on that was when I was pregnant with my fifth, and I was like, okay, I'm going to actually rest this postpartum. I needed it. I was very burnt out. And I looked into getting meals provided for so that the family was fed. I looked into care for the children so that was taken care of. I looked into getting the house cleaned because I wouldn't be able to do that either, to rest for a few weeks postpartum. And when you outsource all these things you do as one person, you're actually like, it adds up. You're like, oh, that's the money that I'm making. Like if I did all these things that I do for my family, for someone else's family, there's a lot of money. Like that is, but because there is no monetary value, and I know this has been done to death, but the monetary value is not there. And therefore, for some reason, the value of motherhood is not there. I thought that there was a cultural shift around this, but it isn't so. I listened to a podcast with Bonnie Blue and Andrew Tate. Have you heard of these
Bonnie
two people?
Blue, one of those prostitutes that had sex with like a bajillion people.
Yeah, OnlyFans. Yeah, and she's very proud of it. Yes. Go power to her.
Well, I don't know if I'll agree with that one, but sure.
Look, I watched it. She actually looks not unhealthy, which is, I don't know. Anyway, we won't go into that. But these are two very like opposite end of the spectrum people who very much agreed with each other on so many things. And the one thing that I noticed time and time again that they agreed on was how lazy mothers are. It was like this rhetoric, like not that they ever, oh no, it could have been said, but like what is it? I guess the way they held the word mother and the rhetoric around mothers, motherhood, women who have children was unfortunately what I think a lot of society feels about mothers, and mothers even internalize that a lot, which is I think where you do have so many women like, oh, I'm suffering, I'm failing because I should be able to do all of this ridiculous amounts of work, and if that's not happening.
But you for that, like look at the state of the world at the moment. Look at the state of mental health, look at the state of youth crime. Like a big part of that is mothers and fathers. It's where it starts, right? So I think one of the issues is as a society, we struggle to zoom out and see the consequences of something if they're not immediate, right? I think about this with health all the time, right? People are like, oh, I took this thing, it didn't do anything. Not now, but in 20, 30 years from now, when you have cancer and autoimmune and your gut issues and whatever, that's because of all the pills and toxins and chemicals and boob jobs and, you know, whatever that you took when you were younger that have piled up and had a consequence. And we struggle to actually see beyond instant gratification. And that is like what motherhood is the consequence of it, I guess, as a child is, you just keep them alive. But the quality of the work you do now will dictate the rest of that child's life. I have spent a lot of money on therapy, a lot. So if I could have gone back and paid my parents that to do a fucking good job, could have saved us all a lot of headaches, you know, but you got to zoom out. So I feel like you just created two really good exercises there. If you're a mother and you're undervaluing yourself, or you feel like your partner or your workplace or the people around you are undervaluing you, I would love for you to actually do the maths. Calculate the jobs you do. Look up how much it would, ask ChatGPT to give me a quote on what it would cost in where I live to pay for all of these things, 365 days a year, morning and night, 24-hour shift, please, and tell me what this would cost. And then secondary to that, just look around you at the people that you know that you see causing strain on society, whether that's because they're overweight, unhealthy, not looking after themselves, strain on the hospital system, drug addicts, crime, breaking the hearts of other people, whatever, and tell me that there isn't value in the job you're doing by raising a child that won't grow up to be that.
We hope.
You know, and
I'll circle back in 20 years.
yeah. But that's all you can do is like, did I do my very best? And again, like, I don't know. I to this day have never met someone who truly that really went wrong that you can't see where it happened. And again, like someone can come and call and message me and say, well, I can say it's the one time that happened. But I also bet maybe you are the mother, the brother, the auntie, the cousin whose ego maybe doesn't want to see what role the family did have in that thing happening. You know what I mean? Like that can be really hard to see, but that is not a small thing, and it's not a small strain on society in the long run. And yeah, it's really interesting to hear you say that, because I guess I just don't feel that way. I don't know. I've grown up, I'm from a big family on my dad's side. I'm one of like 60 cousins. So from when I was about, I think from when I was like 7, oh no, much younger than that. I would have been like younger. I have a cousin that's like a year younger than me, and then 3 years, and then 4 years, and then 5 years, up until children that are as young as 1 right now. So I have seen babies and mothers just like my whole life. So I don't know. And also I have bad parents, and well, not bad parents, that sounds bad. They weren't great. My parents did not do a great job, neither of them, you know, just by facts, by anyone's standards. That to me, it's just, I see what that person has to do and how hard that job is. And it's hard for me to fathom that people don't see that. But yeah, it's good to be reminded that that is still like the rhetoric that exists in a lot of places. And I would agree that I notice that that is internalized by many of the women that come into my space, where they have a lot of judgment for themselves for what they're not able to do and very little awareness of what they are doing. And a big shift is like, I don't actually want them to stop striving. But when I actually shift them from spending time and energy overcommitting and beating themselves up for it, and I shift them to focusing on what they are doing right and what is working, and focusing on that and building confidence and building self-trust and building leverage, they do then get to the things they always wanted to get to. They do still get to strive. They do get to become the mum that's doing more than what they were when they first came into my space, but the way they thought they were going to get the tool they were using, for example, like the victimhood, the poor me, the complaining, the overcommitting, the saying, like that didn't work. And when we shifted to more of a model of building themselves up and acknowledging and appreciating, but still having a standard for where they want to go to, that was when they were actually able to see results.
Yeah, look, and totally necessary. I actually just got off a call to Dr. Paul Turk. He is a evolutionary pediatrician, and he speaks a lot about like the I guess adaptations of our biology when it comes to families, and how it's like been a pinprick in time where we've had the nuclear family. And it sounds like you were probably raised in a family that you had your cousins and aunties and uncles around quite a bit, which is how, you know, all of humanity has kind of strived and survived.
Yeah.
But when you have a large kinship network like that, the amount that actually a mother can do is a lot greater, because the sole responsibility of looking after those children hasn't completely fallen on her shoulders. So we've got like this allo-parenting situation where like you've got cousins come in, and maybe you had cousins that were just like 1 or 2 years older than you, but they could still hold your hand around the house or take you to play a game. You have like these you know, an auntie or an uncle come in when mum's like super burnt out because you're like doing A, B, and C, and they can just like swoop in and be like, hey, like I'll take the kids for an hour to work with me, and they'll do whatever. There's like a larger, and I mean, this also came with big families. Now we don't have that. Now we have fractured families that have only 1, maybe 2 children, and you know, mum and dad live away from each other now because of A, B, and C, but their parents were also divorced. So now you've got like just these scattered families, no kinship networks. And so these responsibilities, the cost of energy, the financial costs, all of this is falling on like the mother and father. But living in the day and age we live in, fathers usually have to work away, and generally mothers have to work at the same time to bring in all those finances. So it's just like one of those situations that does fuel a boiling pot of
and that's
devaluing.
why I think it's so important to like look at the reality of your circumstances, right? Like, as you just said, I don't think it's that controversial to say it takes a village. That is what is traditionally what is meant to happen. We're meant to be raised in a village. There's meant to be multiple people where that responsibility is spread across. And as you said today, in some situations, there's no village. There's not even another parent. There's not another this. In the past, women were not working. You know, there's so many elements that have changed, yet you want to compare yourself to like a fantasy of something that just like genuinely does not exist and tell yourself that you're failing. So if there's one thing you could get really good at, it's like looking at the reality of what your circumstances are. And because if you go down that hole, I think we can get very despair and mental fragility about it. See, like, well, what hope do I have? What chance do I ever have to be happy, to ever get ahead? Like, it's so hard, you know, we've got it the hardest anyone's ever had it. Okay, well, back then they might have also not have flashing toilets, and women didn't have the right to, you know, get a bank loan, or with every cost you're facing, there's also a benefit. And it's just about learning the reality of your circumstances and accepting and understanding that and holding yourself to a reasonable standard. And so much about your life experience can change. Like, again, for myself, I want kids. I want to be married. I want all those things. It's just, this is how it's worked out at this point in my life. I do have a partner. We met a couple of years ago. He's opened a new business. There's so many things I could focus on that I'm missing out on. But I can also do the work to be like, well, cool. Well, I do still have time to have kids. I'm really healthy. I'm in a position financially where I can keep looking after my health as long as possible until my partner is ready to do those things. When I do have kids, I'm going to be a lot mentally better off than a lot of mums that had their kids when they were 21. I will have had a business, but I have to work to focus on those bits too. I still get the thing of, you know, the friend gets engaged, or hearing someone say they have 5 babies, and I'm like, damn, I don't even have one. That'd be nice. But, you know, like it's just, and again, it goes to what I said when I opened the call. Human condition is you're always going to look at what someone else has because it's adaptive evolutionarily, right? If they have fire, I don't have fire. Oh, I need to learn how to make fire. If I don't learn that, my group dies and their group lives. So evolutionarily, there's a place for this comparison frame to allow us to want to strive and develop the human race and build. But again, time and place. Can you find the balance between, personal development? That seems really important, and like self-care and learning to prioritize myself more. Like, that sounds really fantastic. But also time and place of, okay, but I do have 2 kids under the age of 2, and realistically my partner's away. Like, what is realistic in this? And if you don't know, can you talk to someone else? I think this is when a good professional or a good objective friend can be really powerful, to like go to someone else and be like, does this seem reasonable to you? And if they go no, then shift and shift and shift. And because if you can create a realistic week, a realistic time frame, a realistic set of expectations, this failure, this behind, this thing to complain about, it all really starts to decompress and be like less heavy. And then I guess in that, something we haven't really spoken about is, you know, I've spoken a lot on a mindset level and a perspective shifting level. And the other one is regulating your nervous system, you know, you've got kids, go for the walk, do the grounding, have the swim, meditate while you're holding them, notice your breathing while you're at the park, like learn about those ways that you can regulate your physical body, because you can't, you know, we are hyper aware of what is wrong and what is bad when we are dysregulated. Now, that doesn't give you an excuse to just stay there and live in it. Again, it's just data to tell you what tools do you need to bring into your life. And I guess that's that piece with mothers. It's like, no, I don't need you to sit down and do a 45-minute breathwork practice, but, you know, when you're feeding the kids or when you're on the walk, can you be focusing on your diaphragmatic breathing? Can you find some sort of exercise or fun game for them where you're kind of doing something that's good for you, like dancing or moving your body or grounding or getting outside? Can you find a way to habit stack what is good for you with what is realistic within your life circumstances, rather than it being like, I'm a mom, I don't have time to go to the gym. Oh, you don't understand. I can't meditate. I can't do any of those things. It's like, cool, do it differently. Do it in the way that works for your life, but still find the space to do it.
Yeah, no, taking the time in within like the cracks of motherhood and yeah, bringing intention. Actually, I did actually just have a conversation with the bringing intention to the good things within motherhood, which are you can class as self-care rather than self-care needing to be going for a massage or like have a whole goddess day each week. It's like, oh, I'm going to sit down and have a loco love and I'm just going to do it sitting down, and like I'm going to focus on that, resetting my nervous system. And yeah, those little kind of cracks here and there where once you can bring intention to those little things that you're probably doing anyway, but you just do it without thinking about or grounding yourself in the action, you can bring a bit more of spaciousness to your whole situation, which I love that. Again, something I'm going to put into practice. I'll get back to you all. I really wanted to go into some man and young boy stuff with you, Nadia, but I feel like we are running short on time.
Yeah, we've blown out.
We've blown out, but it has been so delightful having you in and talking about this, because I worry about the mental health, and for those just listening, I am using little air markers for that, because there are so many women now falling into these diagnoses of ADHD and potential autism, but it's like, oh no, actually probably just a mum. You've got a lot on your plate and you're not taking those down times to ground in what you're doing. If anyone wants to find you and learn more from you, can you let us know where?
I think you gave it my birth name in the beginning of the podcast. You can find me
that's right.
www.nadiasophiacoaching.com, and I think on Instagram it's either with the dots or the underscores in between. But yeah, if you look up Nadia Sophia, I should hopefully pop up. And yeah, I think like on that parting comment, it's like the mental health revolution started to help. And as per overcorrection, it's potentially coming into a space where it's hurting a little bit. And that's understanding like awareness and labeling and sharing and all those things have a place, as does action and personal responsibility and self-trust. And you observe yourself, like where do you sit on the spectrums that we've discussed, and play around with going in the other direction and see what happens. Like that is the other thing. It is a process of discovering within yourself. Like even for me, I'm always, okay, let's work a little bit more. Okay, that was too much. Let's rest. Like you need to just be willing to play around and not be too rigid. And anywhere you are too rigid is probably somewhere to ask yourself like, yeah, does this still serve my current circumstances?
I love that. I feel like we could almost bring back the idea of earning your rest. I know that was like really taboo for a while. You shouldn't have to earn your rest, but I think for me it's quite balanced, because I'm like, I'll do this work and then I'll rest, and then I'll do this work and then I'll rest, and it ends up coming to a bit of an equilibrium.
Yeah.
Anyway, again, thank you so much, Nadia, for coming on, and thank you everyone for tuning in. Thanks for joining me today. If this ignited a flame for you, please share, follow the show, and leave a review. The more support and subscriptions the show gets, the more powerful and credentialed guests I can bring on to deepen these conversations. I appreciate you being here, and I will see you next week.